How do you build a hardware company who has a sustainable and social impact? How do you bring investors on board? How do you combine short-term revenue with long-term impact? And how do you build an international team of A players in research and development, data, marketing, and sales? This is what we are going to talk about today with Pascal Asselin, co-founder and CEO of Morfo. Morfo restores large-scale forest ecosystems with the help of drones and an innovative method. With a single drone, they can process up to 50 hectares of forest imagery per day and plant 180 seed pods every minute, even across steep and difficult to access lands like rainforests. They also have a big social impact as they make sure to involve the local communities in their projects. And in just a year, their first project went from a vegetation cover of 0.3% to 42% by planting 15 different species of trees and plants, all native to the region. Right now, they have 600 hectares of forest in restoration in 3 different places. Their mission is to restore, by 2030, 1 million hectares of forest. That means planting 1.2 billion trees with an innovative solution. They raised €4 million of seed round in November, have 31 people in their team, and today I'm very happy to welcome their CEO and co-founder, Pascal. Pascal, how are you?
Bonjour, and welcome to Mission First, the podcast to learn from successful entrepreneurs changing the world for the better. In this podcast, you will learn from entrepreneurs who have already found product market fit and are scaling up fast. We discuss their challenges and the strategies they have applied to make things work. Think of it as a masterclass about business and product innovation, growth marketing, and leadership. I am Gilles Toussaint. I help mission-driven companies exceed their revenue objectives with growth marketing, product-led growth, and LinkedIn personal branding strategies.
I'm very good. Thank you, Gilles.
Thank you very much for being here today with us. This is Mission First, so let's start there. What's your mission?
Our mission, as you said, is quite simple and easy. So how to restore large-scale forest ecosystems. How can we make sure that within 20, 30 years, we'll have restored the 1 billion hectares that is required by the UN, but that is the state of the forest today. 1 billion hectares have to be restored without impacting human activities, meaning you have all these forests, all these lands that have no use for today. And so how can we put these forests and benefit from all their ecosystem services, meaning limitation of erosion, water resources, to protect people, to host people. 1.6 billion people are depending on living in the forest or surrounded by the forest. So how can we make sure that we can actually build the conditions for human beings on the earth to live still in 100 years, in the greatest conditions?
So the name of the company is Morfo. No idea why. Can you tell us a bit why?
Sure. So Morfo is a butterfly, an Amazonian butterfly that you can find not so many times. And growing up in French Guiana, that's a butterfly we were observing once or twice a week. And so, it's like a blue butterfly with amazing colors. And so we had this butterfly in mind, and really that's an image we had a lot. And even talking about what's Morfo, and our company is about forests. And we saw the domain name .rest. And so making Morfo.rest makes more forests. So more forest is our activity. So everything was linked.
That's a perfect word game.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and a beautiful inspiration because you're doing drones. So butterfly, flying, forest. It's
exactly
everything comes together. How big is your team right now, and what can you share in terms of impact at the moment?
So our team today is 31 people based in France and in Brazil. So we have 20 people in France and 11 people now in Brazil. And Our activities or our projects, Reforestation project, takes place in French Guyana first, where I grew up. Then we went to Gabon in Central Africa, and we opened the Brazilian country as the biggest market in the world for tropical forest, which is our main focus for now. And so we are currently restoring 600 hectares across 19 projects today, and across these 3 locations. And one important thing when talking about forest, you think about environment, of course, but it's a lot about people. It's a lot about all these people living nearby these forests. And so that's an impact that is really important for us too, is that we've involved more than 1,000 people, directly or indirectly, to our very first project.
And what is Morfo exactly? So what's your elevator pitch? I see a beautiful drone behind you. So how what's your method? What's your solution for that?
Our idea was how to restore these forest ecosystems, but with high quality projects, meaning biodiversity and social impact. But how can we scale these operations? And when you combine these two, then you can lead to a high carbon sequestration, which is something that might interest a few people now. And so the idea was how can we combine the local knowledge with science, but with techniques and technologies like operational excellence, because we are in the field too. And so that's why we were thinking on how can we make sure we have all this. And so we developed a 4-step method in which we have first a diagnosis, in which we go to the field. We make soil analysis, but we make drone analysis and satellite analysis too, leading to the second part, which is the planification or the planning, which seems maybe not that important, but it's the key of the project because it's like multi-year planning. And that's what we call when we prepare this smart planting plan on what kind of species, where, with what kind of soils, where and when. And so, these are simple questions, but they are really hard to answer. Even more when we are talking about projects that we deploy into the nature, that we won't monitor, yes, but not control. And so we have to collaborate closely with nature. So we have to make sure that the seeds and the species that we are planting will still be able to be there in 200 years, because that's our objective, having native and resilient forests. So we have to anticipate.
Yeah, to not plant monoculture forests
with biodiversity, but even this biodiversity, if you plant it, you have to make sure that all these heat waves and all the changes that we are observing, that the species that we are planting will survive. So that's part of the second step of planning. Then we are going to the planting phase. So that's the time when we deploy the drones, but the drones are not only planting the seeds, they are planting the seed pods. So the seed pods are quite unique technology that we've developed, in which you find the seed, of course, but you find nutrients, you find fungi, you find bacteria, you find many things that allows not only to protect the seeds at the very first stages of their growth, but as well to boost it and to boost the soils that have been degraded in every project we develop. And so that's the phase of planting, drones, seed pods, and we have this kind of hardware not only with the drone, but as well with the encapsulation machine, because we have to create these 100,000s of seed pods for the project.
And they are I read, is it 80% of them are actually, going to life and going to live?
Yeah, so that's the figure we have from the labs in real conditions, but in labs, and so that's what we are confirming in real life condition. But that's the objective, of course, is to have one seed pod equal one plant or one tree. And so this is the third step, and the last step, which is crucial, is the monitoring. Because we have to make sure that we understand what's happening on the field. First, to understand if we have to act again and to correct the trajectory, to understand what kind of species are growing and what kind of species are not growing, to make sure that on other projects we can learn from it and improve our next plantations. And so with this monitoring, we are able to count the seedlings, to count the trees, to count the plants, to identify all the species, and then to have many calculations that can help us on biodiversity indexes or on carbon sequestration calculations.
What's the timeline? How long do you stay monitoring these fields where you've planted the pods?
So for now, it goes from 5 years to 30 years.
And does it mean in that case that you can adjust so for example, if you realize that some species have not grown properly, can you then do a second round of planting to just plant just these species?
Yeah, that can be a plan to have like multi-year plantations to make sure that we have this actual forest growing, because this is our like mission, and everything that we embody is to make sure that forests are growing. So of course, yes, we are observing, but there might be reasons why this species didn't grow, and so I identified the reason first and make sure that if we do it again, it's like properly made, or just maybe we have to change the species because they were not adapted to the field or for some conditions.
Planting these forests, like who are your clients? And what is your business model, to understand, to also give the big picture to everyone listening before we go into the details about the advice you prepared for this episode?
So our clients are all the people who have degraded lands. That's their common point. And they have regulations that compel them to restore this ecosystem. Either because you are a landowner, and if we take the example of Amazon, because it's quite a well-known example, if you have 100 hectares in Amazon, you need to preserve, and if it has been degraded, restore 80% of it.
And who would be that owner in that case? Is it the state, or are you talking about are there sometimes private people or companies?
It can be companies, can be NGOs, can be like anything, and that's a common rule. So they have to restore. This rule can change over the percentages in the different forests, but that's a rule you can find anywhere. So that's a use case, and another one would be to work on different kind of industries and companies that have a direct impact on nature, and how to make sure they can restore after exploitation the lands where they had activity, and how can we make sure that their impact on nature is the less negative possible. And the business model, we talked about these 4 steps. And so we bill per hectare. It's quite simple. It's like reforestation as a service. We bill per hectare for every stage of the project.
What do we need to know from you? Which context do I need to be aware of to understand, why you have this passion that, led you here to lead this usually very crazy entrepreneurial journey, going back to your childhood, your past experience, your career? What should we know about you to understand why you are here right now?
Sure. So one important thing to know indeed, back from the childhood, is that I grew up in French Guiana, in the Amazon rainforest, with a father who was a gold miner. And so I spent so many weekends on the mining sites. And when you're young, you're a child, a mining site is quite impressive. It's like it's a hole in the middle of the forest. You have forest everywhere, and you have this like thing, this layer of soil. And it's like a scar, in the forest. And so that's like a strong image. And even I talked to someone recently who told me like the first time I saw this, I cried. And it was like a 40-year-old person. So it's like strong images, and we grew up with that. And I say we because my father is also a co-founder of Morfo, and so we grew up together with these images. But our father was really conscious about this, about the impact of it. His generation, his was the one of the gold rush in Brazil, which was called Serra Pelada. And so, it was like so trendy. It was that thing. But then, like...
Was he a founder of the mine?
So back in these days, no, but after, he had like his own mines in French Guiana. But he started really on the field, in the river and everything, so doing it. And so growing up, like he was telling us like, guys, you'll have to do something about that, because like I think we did something wrong on that. It was quite a simple message, and I think this is really back from like my really early years and my really first memories, hearing that. And so growing up, we had always this thing, because our father is still working there and still have this activity, and saying, okay, guys, we need to act, we need to do something. And so, that was like more than the passion, it's a topic we grew up with. And so when we felt ready, for two reasons, Hugo, so my brother, went to work in French Guiana for all this environmental rehabilitation of the mines, and so he understood the topic. He went really deep in the topic, and he did it. And I started the company before, and when we just talked together about this topic, we were like, okay, we need to do something, but let's take a step back, because French Guiana is this, the world is big like this. And so how can we make sure that if we create a company, we want to have the greatest impact and meaningful impact we can have on the planet? And so that's why we had this step back and saying, okay, we need to tackle these tropical forest ecosystems, and we need to do things right, but to do things at scale as well.
That's a really like a inspiring story to hear. Let's talk about how to find a financial model that make investors interested in the company, because of course you're not building a software, and the hardware is very expensive. I mean, in like the operations, I guess, is also very expensive. You've prepared a few advice about this. What's your recommendation? How did you find these financial models that are interesting for the investors?
So the first thing when we were thinking about the company and how we can reach the scale is, of course, how can we fund the innovations? How can you fund the research and development? And then how can you fund all these projects? Meaning you have to find a right business model, but as well as the model that will fit with some financial partners, let's say, or just like investors. And so the first thing was to observe that there are regulations, and so there are existing constraints that compel actors to act. And that's really something that's first reassuring for like, let's say, investors, because you have you can sell actually the thing that you'll develop. So that they need to think like, what will be out of it, because we love the mission, but is it something that can emerge? And so regulation is a first thing. And so, of course, like working with government to make sure that they are putting the right regulation, making them evolve so that you can accelerate the activity is something really important. But of course, you might understand that it's a long way to go. And so when we arrived, let's say, and when we created the company, we already had this, let's say, legal frame that could allow our activity to emerge. And we see like a great trend on all the climate topics, and even more on forest and biodiversity, that can help us to develop the activity. So that would be the first thing. The second one is like, we have forests, and we are restoring forests. So we start from scratch, so from the soil, from zero. But we are talking about the forests that will like be mature in 30 years. But we are like a 3-year-old company. So we have all these time frames, and we need to make sure we can have revenues now to fund and to finance all this R&D and to finance this project. So how can you make sure that you work with all these time frames, but acting in now, because climate change is now, and we need to act now and fast, but at large scale. And so the idea was, how can we make sure that we can have the revenues in the shorter term possible? And that's when we had to think about the model that we wanted to have, because you have this, let's say, carbon credit thing, but it's a long way to go, because you are like emitting the carbon credits along the way. So every 5 to 7 years, you can say, okay, we captured or sequestered all this quantity of carbon, of ton equivalent carbon. And so, you calculate, and then you can sell to people. But then you have to wait all this time. So from this model, we already saw a great thing that could pre-sell carbon credits. So you can already fund these projects. But then it was still like a long time. So we're like, okay, all these systems are maybe a too long way to go. And we need to focus on who we are, saying a solution, scientific, technical, and technological solution that can allow large-scale forest restoration. And so thinking about that, that's where we shifted on this reforestation as a service model, in which the idea is to sell a service to make sure the forest will grow, and that's where the monitoring will take place. But our main focus of action is on the first 3 years. And so from a forest that will grow over 30 years, we are actually making the revenue, like 80% of the revenues in the first 3 years. And that's when we started to have something that could fit into the minds of investors and even as a startup company to make sure that we can fund our growth.
If this podcast helps you, please do me a huge favor and click on the follow button on your podcast platform. It helps to grow this podcast faster and to convince the most impactful entrepreneurs of the world to join me in these interviews so that you and other entrepreneurs can learn from them.
Before we move to the next thing, if I may, so here to summarize, you considered pre-selling carbon credits, but then you moved to the system, the business model you have now, where you actually build by hectares of forest you are restoring.
Exactly. Not on the same topic, but a bit different point of view is how to make sure you can have the credibility as well to say what you're saying. And so for that, when we firstly imagined the company, we thought directly about science. Because if you want to do the things right, you have to understand the local knowledge, because you won't invent the wheel again. I don't know if that's the
right. You won't reinvent the wheel. Yeah, that's what we say in English too.
So how not to reinvent the wheel, but as well, how can you make sure that you can leverage all the scientific knowledge that has been developed over the last years and maybe decades. And that's when we started talking to scientists, to the best scientists, first in France and then in Brazil. And when they understood the concept, they were really fond of what we were saying, because not only we could leverage what they have been developing and searching for many years, but they can see a great ending to these problems of degraded lands, and how can we make sure we can actually restore large-scale forest ecosystems. And when you have these scientists that back you, and you have their support, then when you talk to investors and you have these videos, or even if they want to make rough calls and call them, and they're saying, yes, I believe in them and I think they will solve the problem. And these are reference as scientists in the world. Then you have this credibility, and you have more than the credibility as you as an entrepreneur or even you as a scientist, but you have their support. And so that's really something that we see is essential, but because it's a true, I don't know how to say that, but it's a true thing that we embody. It's we think that science will help us solve the problem, and that's why we invest so much. Close to 50% of our team are searchers, scientists, extra. So because we believe in it, we have this credibility, and our way of acting is comprehensive and concrete.
To get a little bit deeper into that part, so you went to scientists to really have the validation that your vision and the technological vision you have as well is good, and that they believe in it. What's your background, and what was the background of the team at that stage in order to reach to the scientists? At that stage, did you have the scientists that had the final technological system already in mind or prepared, or did you work with a lab at the university where you already had the solution prepared and you just had to validate it, or did you just have a business vision and just sold it and then started to build it?
We started, so we were the three of us, so Hugo and Adrien and I.
Who is your brother, right?
So Hugo is my brother, and Adrien is a long-term friend. So I know them very well. I know their quality. And from my past entrepreneurial experience, I knew a bit of what could I bring to the project too. And so we understood first that we didn't know anything, and that was the first quality that we had, like not knowing anything and saying that, and assuming the fact that we needed to learn everything. So that's maybe the first thing we did, because we are doers. So we wanted to do, so we wanted to go in the field, but we wanted to do things right. So we read so many scientific papers.
And your background, where for the three of you?
Sorry, so the three of you. So with Adrien, we've made like business schools. But the two of us had like entrepreneurial experience, and Adrien had like kind of scientific entrepreneurial experience, creating like new bioplastics and creating his own plant and many things. So he was business school, but really like scientific mind. And Hugo was more of a mechatronic engineer. So he's made studies in like, this kind of space environment. Exactly.
And you knew what you didn't know.
Exactly.
Which a lot of people, I think, this is the most important thing for I think high performing people. They know what they don't know.
Yeah, and we know that we don't know anything, and that's even better. And even today, when we learn so many things, we still have this like state of mind saying, okay, we have so much to learn and to know more, so that, okay, yeah, we know a few things, but it's nothing compared to what we still need to learn to make sure that we'll do things right. And so we started like reading so many scientific papers, meeting so many people, so many experts on these fields. But with this precise idea of what we wanted to do, restore tropical forest ecosystems. Simple, focus. And so, when you hear people, you just like grab all this information and you make sure that it's going, and even if it's like, it can change the way you think, but it was making us like maturing the idea so fast that we invented like the concept of restoring forest ecosystem thanks to drones and thanks to seed pods. Some companies already started in some things of this concept, and so we could take some inspiration from them too. But applying it to tropical forest ecosystems is really something else. It's like each time you change your type of forest, it's like a new job, a new mission. And so our background was not from there. So as young entrepreneurs, because we are like 27 and 28, the three of us, we need to make sure to be backed by the best and by experts. And so we started by presenting the concept to a few scientists in France. And that's how we started, by like a scientific collaboration to make sure that this concept we invented, we can make sure it becomes a reality. But then when we had the means to hire the people inside the team to be backed by this expert internally, whether in science, because we have two types of science. We have a science about forest ecosystems, but we have data science as well to analyze and monitor all these forests, which is like a crucial part in all what we do. But to be backed in marketing, to be back on the Brazilian market, when we got there, it was important to be backed. I think I'm going already on the second topic.
That's a good part to start talking about building the team, and we'll go back to the gigantic potential of markets after. So like that's a good thing about here. We do what we want. So explain me like in that part, how did you build that team, and how do you keep on building that team?
Yeah. So that was really the very first thing. We made a huge work. We were really proud when we were the three of us, but we were feeling that all the lacks and the things we needed to add in the team to make sure that the project can grow and can grow healthily. And so that's when we first raised funds. So people believed in the project when we already but just planted like 60 hectares in the very first project in French Guyana. And so we didn't have that much, but we had these drones actually. That was the very first one that flew over French Guyana.
How many were you in the team for the first project before you?
The three of us.
Just the three of you, okay.
Yeah, exactly. And the pictures and the videos were quite nice to see again. But it was really a great project and great success on this project, because now we have the result, and that's part of the results you talked earlier about the vegetation that is coming back from a really poor soil. But yeah, anyway, we raised funds, and at that time we were like 3 + 1 intern in the team, and that's when we decided to say, okay, we need to be backed by these experts, and in all the fields, meaning this ecosystem, tropical ecosystem R&D, data science R&D, and data science just operations too. Brazil. So we hired like a general manager there to make sure that we are a Franco-Brazilian company, and we need to be Brazilian and French in both countries, in France and in Brazil. And that's really the mix of the culture that gives us the power of the company. But we needed to be backed in marketing communication, public relations, and everything. And later, because quite recently, in finance too. So, always saying, okay, I know I can do things because we are workers, but we need to be backed by people that are better than us. And I think that's really like the mentality that we always have and we still have, and we want to keep that for the next 50 years. And I think that's how we grew this company and this team well. This is like really packed now, and that we make sure that with all these different backgrounds, different careers, in terms of like types of career, but in terms of geography, in terms of everything, we have people from all around the world, and to make sure that they understand what other people are doing, because it's not that easy when you have some marketing people talking to some scientist people or sales people talking to, I don't know, like R&D on data people. And so we have the same vision, and we have a value that we all embody. We wake up every morning to grow a forest. And so, we all have our different reasons to grow this forest. We all have our reasons to wake up every morning. But we have the same objective at the end. And that's really like a strong part of what we do. And so what we need to do, and what we do, and we really like insist on it, is first have these OKRs things that can have, one mission and how it declines in every team. And I absolutely love these systems for that. And the second one is we have one concept that we call sharing is caring, is that like every 2 weeks, we have someone sharing about his passion on his work, sharing how he does things, or she does things, why he does love this, and to make sure that all the people understand, all the team understand what other people in the team is doing, and how does everybody contribute to restoring this forest.
And you're talking about OKRs. So can you give us a brief overview of how you actually implement your OKRs in your company? And you were saying, is it by mission in that case, or is it by mission? How do you implement the OKRs, or what's your experience with OKRs?
So the very first implementation was not that easy. It was quite hard because, we started, what I like in the way we did it is we started with the values that we have and that we embody, and that are about science, so pioneering in science. So if you have one OKR, meaning, okay, we need to pioneer and be a leading reference in science for ecosystems and in data applied to this topic. But we are an operational company, so we need to sell and deploy projects. And we need to build this credibility to make sure that the first two can still live. And so building this science and public credibility. And so we had this really like three first objective that are declining in everybody in the team, and everybody can feel linked to these objectives. And so the first thing was, how can we make sure we implement these OKRs into the teams? And so the very first steps were quite hard, because when people are not familiar with the system, it's like always, you need to make like key result that you can count them, but it's not 0 to 1. Like, you have to get this granularity. And so it's kind of like a lot of pedagogy about the topic on how it is structured and how you can make sure that people understand it. It can start to be like meaningful for the team as well. So the first time we did it was not the perfect, but we accepted it, saying, okay, okay, we have some 0 to 100% or 0 to 1, and it's okay. Let's start like this, and let's improve it when the team starts to understand the meaning of it and the impact of it on the whole culture, but even in your daily life, because daily life or daily working days. And you know, when you have people from the teams sending to their head or saying to their managers, okay, we're just like 35%, it's already 2 months that have passed, we have to get to this objective, you know that, you know, something happened because they say, okay, we need to make sure that we are contributing to the whole company objective. And that's when, that's why I love it. And I want to make sure that we can continue sharing that and making sure this has the most impact. You know, everybody in the team, not only the founders and not only the managers, but everybody in the team can feel their impact on the whole company. And that's what I love.
That's a very powerful tool when rolled out.
Yeah,
well.
Yeah, it's not easy at all. And I think we're not at all on the perfect today, but, you know, it's getting better and better.
If you have people excited, that's the most important part first.
Exactly.
Something you mentioned to me as well is the importance of management in the different location. Can you iterate a bit on that? How do you actually optimize the management of your operations or your team in working in 2 different countries or several different countries now? So
the very first point of it was when we hired the general manager for Brazil to make sure that when we go to a new country, we understand it. French Guiana, it was quite easy because we grew up there. Yeah. It's still France, but we knew it. Brazil is like a totally new world. And as I was saying earlier, we don't know it, and we know we don't know it. And we need someone that knows way better than us to make sure that we won't do the mistakes that everybody can do. And so that was the very, 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 very first thing we did in Brazil, is to hire Gregory. And Gregory is like French and Brazilian. He has spent like 30 years in Brazil. His wife is Brazilian.
Did you always find people who are both French and the other country? Do you always find people who are both that's nationalities?
Funny, we have many of them. Not like searching for them, but I think they find us better. But yeah, and that's something we absolutely love, because that's what we were saying. Like, we try to be as Brazilian as we can in France, and we try to be as French as we can in Brazil. And so that, you know, we have this culture. So the first step was to hire Gregory in Brazil. And then the idea is to have mixed teams, so that you have people working from France or from French Guiana, but as well as from Brazil. And so they can talk together and improve the processes and see what were their problems, and they feel linked because it's the same team. You know, it's not just I don't know how you say the filial, but another sister company. It's not that. It's the same company. It's the same objective. It's just not the same locations. And so the first thing was to make sure that they have the same mission together. So OKRs is a great tool too for that. But we have mixed teams so that they feel linked and they are on the same team. So even if it's a whole team, you know, you have always this buddy thing inside the teams, sharing the same problems, sharing the same issues, and sharing the culture as much as we can. And, you know, Gregory is really in Brazil the person that is first taking the culture and sharing to people, but then, you know, people are leaving the country and making it evolve, and we are making sure that they are going on the same towards the same direction. And that's something that's, I think, the main thing is that we are building a really strong culture, and as it's strong, it's shared, whether you are in France, in Brazil, or in French Guiana. So can you talk a bit about how you make sure you have a social impact as well as a sustainable impact, and how that means that you make sure you involve the local population, as I understand?
Hey, before you jump to the next part of this episode, one quick info. If you don't want to miss the best strategies for entrepreneurs like you, sign up for my newsletter with a link in the description. You will receive a summary of advice from each episode, get personal recommendations based on your startup stage and industry. And you will also receive my most useful growth and LinkedIn marketing strategies. Just follow the link in the description to sign up. Back to the next part of this interview.
There are different ways. The most obvious one is that when we prepare a project, we always work with the local communities, and usually working with an NGO, a local NGO that have been working for projects for the past 15 to 20 years. They know the job, they do it really well, but they don't scale the operations. And so when we go to a place, a new location, we make sure we understand the ecosystem, not only the natural ecosystem, but the social ecosystem, the social context of this project, and making sure that we involve the people that have been involved for the last 10, 20 years. Because they know it, and we don't know the place. It's always the same, like, we know we don't know, and so, but we need people that knows, who knows. And so we always start by this means, and so involving them in the project, meaning from the preparation of the soils when needed, even we have our methodology, but we always combine with traditional methods, meaning that we involve these NGOs into the project from 10 to 20% of the surface of the whole project. Then usually we involve and we employ one person from the field to make sure that we can have a monitoring, like a constant monitoring from the field. And for one example, in the project we have in the south of the state of Bahia in Brazil, we hired the grandson of the old farmer that is next to the project, and so that he can have he has the equipment to make sure that he can make the monitoring for us. And it's really like this way that we have this very first and obvious social impact, because for us it's obvious that we need to work together with these people. It doesn't make any sense for us. It's not our project just to do this project without involving these people. And the second way, which is as important as this one, is that when you do reforestation at scale, and when you do it with biodiversity, you need seeds. And these are not seeds you can find in the supermarket. And so you need to collect the seeds. And when you need to collect the seeds, you have to go to the forest, you have to know the trees, you have to know the species, the fruits, and you have to collect them. And that's where we have the biggest impact. Because we work with a collection network in Brazil that are employing thousands of people. And by having this project, we create and we bolster this new economy, this bioeconomy in Brazil for these really local people. And that's when, we told earlier, but already 1,000 people worked directly, but mostly directly and indirectly for our projects. It's mainly on this part.
So you involve NGOs and you involve seed collectors. Case.
Exactly.
Very important. I learned about native seeds only recently. So can you define, what do we define as a native seed and why is it important? What's the difference with other seeds? I learned about it just because my basilicum was just dying, and on LinkedIn somebody told me you should buy native seeds. Okay. Or you should grow native plants.
Yeah. So first, mainly to make it short, is native is like a plant that comes from the region where you have the project. So we talk about endemism and sometimes even micro-endemism. I discovered this quite recently last year, that sometimes you have just a hill and you find one species that is living, that you can find in the world just on this hill. And this is called micro-endemism. I love this example. So planting native species means for us finding the species and finding the seeds from the very same region. And for example, we work in Pará in Brazil, which is a big state, the same size of France, just the Pará. And so when you are in the south of Pará or in the north of Pará, it's not the same seeds, and what is native there is not native there. So you have to make sure that you have these native species that will strive in this environment, to make sure that you reproduce as much as you can the primary forest that you have, but as well as, this is the smart planting that we are doing, is anticipating climate change, and so that you make sure that these native species will strive over climate change. So we combine these two.
When you say the difference between, I can imagine the south of France and the north of France being, the difference of temperature in that case. So it means from the same type of tree, are you talking about two different type of trees in that case, or are you talking about sometime the same kind of tree, the same species of tree can have a species that have been collected from trees that are growing in the south of that state in Brazil will have a better survival growing chance than if you plant it in the south, and if you try to plant it in the north, it won't grow as well.
Exactly, it's both of it, since you have like different species, but even when the same species can have different variants, I don't know how you would say that, and so yeah, it's not the same, and the one that you plant in the south won't survive in the north, or contrary, or even sometimes the adaptation that they've made can be dangerous for the rest of the ecosystem if it's planted somewhere else.
Yeah, because it can disrupt it.
Exactly, in the bad sense.
Yeah,
in the bad way.
Let's go back to the first part when we're talking about the financial models and how to attract investors. So we talked about using science, the foundation for credibility, and how to build that team. Before going to that one, when you build your team, what's your advice to recruit the best people there? You mentioned having people who are passionate, having people who are sometimes both culture whenever it's possible, by being like both, having double nationalities, for example. What are your other advice in order to build, especially a team of, I meet a lot of people who are into entrepreneurs who are building software. So we talk sometimes about sales and marketing, but when it comes to R&D and data, how do you not being a scientist, what's usually your way to make sure the people you are hiring are actually great scientists and great engineers?
I think there are like two kind of answers here. The first one is about the culture, and the second one is about the skills. So the first thing is that when we hired this leadership team, we didn't share, we didn't communicate yet about the fundraising. Our website was absolutely horrible, but we had this mission and we had this vision, and we knew where we wanted to go. So the people first that we talked to for these recruitments were not coming for like the visibility that we have back at that time, but for the mission that we have and that we embodied. And when we talk about like these greatest experts and everything, sometimes like there are different visions of it, but for us it's like first people that are humble, that are smiling, and that are ambitious. And so when we have all these three, then we say, okay, now we talk, and now let's see if you are good at what you are doing, and if you're an expert. And so of course the topic for us was like, how can we make sure that the scientists that we will be hiring will be good at it, and how the machine learning engineer or the machine learning director that we are hiring knows how to do. And as always, it's about like how do we surround ourselves. And so we took to some experts that were working with us, and we asked them to help us in this processes of recruitment, exactly, and to make sure that they structured with us the case studies to try them, the questions. Sometimes they participated to some interviews, and so that's how we started when we were the three of us, and we didn't know how to make sure that they were good or not. Once validated that they would fit with the culture we wanted to build and the company and the vision that we had, that's we surrounded first by the experts externally, and then now we have them internally.
And have proper tests. So I think that this is very important here, from what I hear, and the mistakes I see in lots of entrepreneurs or even clients or people who wanted to hire me sometimes, who they don't ask. You realize they don't ask questions and they don't know who they are hiring. And I'm also a big believer that like in every recruitment I do, I think this is a great part that you said here. You surround yourself with experts who can do a part of the recruiting if it's not your field of expertise. And then you have always challenges or use cases or something to do that is part of their job that someone else or yourself can analyze if you have the expertise. Thanks for sharing this. So now, going back to the financial part, one of the other criteria you said to me was, in order to make sure you can attract the investors, is you project yourself into markets with a gigantic potential. So what do you mean here?
The two markets that we have, as mentioned earlier, is one about the compliance, the regulations that exist. The other one about carbon, which is a trendy topic, but we don't know exactly where it will be. We can talk about this later. But the first one about regulations is how big is the market, and where can you? It's more of a go-to-market strategy. Where will be your first step into this market to make sure you validate the hypothesis, you validate the business model before going to these accounts, and that's where it starts to be gigantic, because you sign a first contract, let's say of like 50 hectares, but then they have 500 hectares per year because you have activities, you have lands that have been like degraded by agriculture, pastoral land, so many things, and you have all these lands that have to be restored on a plan, and you know the plan, you know how many hectares that have to be restored over the years. And so when you go into these, let's say, accounts or like started to work with these kind of actors, then you know that the market is opening and you're doing like 10 times, 100 times the potential that you had earlier. And so I think that's really like the point in opening this gigantic market is first you open a few accounts, then you go deeper into these accounts, and going deeper into these accounts, you gain the credibility to have these other accounts and go deeper in this, and and then it's like
what do you mean by accounts
effect.
Here? Are you talking about clients?
Yeah, I'm saying clients or working with a company, working with an NGO. Accounts is not really the good name, but in English,
so your customers, your clients. You mean you evaluate basically. You find clients that even if you start with a small project with them, the market is big behind. They have the need behind it, which is way bigger.
Exactly. So that's the first point, and the second one about carbon credits. It's a market that knows highs and lows and high and lows. The way we tackle it is like we start a forest from zero and then we grow it. So you cannot contest that we have an impact on environment and that it has sequestered carbon. Even more, saying that we are taking into account biodiversity, restoring 20, 30, 40 species, and taking into account and involving local communities. And that's really important on all these projects. And when you talk about this market, you have these opportunities that are being opened that are absolutely huge. And we have this, but that we have this regulatory market. And that's when we say we have this market that is already big, that is low risk, because we know that our company will be solid thanks to it. But we have these opportunities on voluntary carbon markets that can be like really, really high reward. And that is low risk, high reward that investors really like. That's really what we are living through these two kind of markets we are addressing.
Yeah, so we're not sure yet about where the carbon market is going to be. And so, but the investors, the people backing you up, have the insurance that where you are going right now, it's very, very safe, low risk. I saw on your website, what's the purpose of having a reforestation glossary offered on your Linktree? So when you go on your LinkedIn page, or the LinkedIn page of your company, go to Linktree, and then you have your website, of course, but you have a reforestation glossary. I'm pretty sure it's marketing related, with also probably education as well, which is part of marketing. But can you tell me a bit more about this?
Sure. It's a quite funny question, but the very first thing we started this glossary was for the team first, because we have so many things that we tackle, and that's what we were saying, but so many different teams, so many different topics, always talking about forest and reforestation, that we understood that some words that some people are experts on it, but they never heard this one. And so we needed the team to understand the full ecosystems of words that we are working with, and to make sure that when we work as a team, we understand what other people are saying. So that's how we started it. And we were saying, okay, that's quite great, because when you have this glossary, you understand better what's the whole ecosystems and this whole, words that we have in these ecosystems, and then it helps understanding it better. So I think it's quite simple, the idea of of course, educational or pedagogy about what is a forest ecosystem and what needs to be taken into account when talking about this topic.
Hey, just a 10-second break to tell you. I just released a free video presentation to explain the 3 key strategies I use to get 7,500 change makers to follow me on LinkedIn and to reach more than 1 million people this year with my posts. It's free. Just follow the link in the description to download it.
Okay, and you decided to offer it to everyone
Exactly.
At the moment. Cool. What is one book you would recommend entrepreneurs to read, or what is one book that had a high impact on you?
So I have 2 in mind when asking this question. The first one and most recent one was one from Mark Maslin, which is called How to Save the Planet, The Facts. And what I really like in this book, it's like it's like one idea, one sentence. It's like The Art of the War was written like that, and he took the same model, and you have like it's a 3-hour reading, and he takes with amazing sources and bibliography. But he takes all the topics about impact and how to make sure that what is the situation, so you understand it, how can we make things better? And you finish this book, you're like, okay, we are in a grave situation, but we have opportunities and we need to act. And I really liked it because, I have my topic, I usually read many things around, but then you have this global picture of what is climate change, what problems do we have, and how can we tackle them.
It's the first time I hear it. I'll definitely check it out.
Yeah. The second one is I read it 5 years ago, but I usually read a few pages frequently. Is Reinventing Organization by Frédéric Laloux, which is a blasting book to change the way you see companies. And what is funny is that his recommendation is to see a company as an ecosystem where people can help others, but making leveraging their strengths, their qualities, and making sure that you don't have this pyramid that we usually see in companies, but people that are working together as an ecosystem. And sometimes you just have to leave things to be, and you observe amazing movements in your companies, and that's how we structure the company, and that's part of the values we embody too. But seeing the not only our activity and our field project as ecosystems, but the whole company as it.
Have you seen that he started a new project called The Week?
I've seen it, but do you know more about it?
But you haven't done it yet.
No, not yet, but might apply soon too.
Okay, so for those who haven't heard about it, a little bit of a promotion here. I mean, free promotion, and I don't have anything with Frédéric Laloux, but it seems very inspiring, and it's a project where it's if you Google The Week and sustainability, you will find it, and it's a project when if you want to involve people who actually, it's hard for you to convince them to do something for climate, or to understand why actually you might be eco-anxious, or and it's a project where they've developed it that apparently works very well. They used a lot of psychological analysis to make sure this is working in the best way possible, and it's basically 3 sessions. You book a week with a few people. It can be from your company or friends or family, and you book 3 slots of, I think, 1 hour, where you watch a movie of 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes, an hour, and then you have a series of questions that you answer together after, and that make you go through this shape of realizing how bad the system is, but that there is actually hope and that there is things to do together. So The Week from Frédéric Laloux. Thank you very much for sharing that. So any podcast or something you'd recommend, or some other sources you'd recommend people to listen to watch?
We have one in France that I really like, called Génération DIY. Génération Do It Yourself, because the guy is taking so long, like 2-3 hours, to talk about the lives of amazing entrepreneurs, and so going beyond only their adventure and the performance, but what's behind the scenes. And I really like that. You need to have time for that, because like listening to 2 or 3 hours might be long, but it's amazing to meet people just through podcasts. And recently I was more like, I didn't have time yet. I didn't take the time enough, and I'm sad about it, to listen to more podcasts. But when I have time, it's the one I pick.
It's a bit generation do it yourself. It's a French equivalent of Lex Friedman, I feel like, with very, very long conversation. I mean, Lex Friedman, he goes a bit more about sometimes political. Here it's focused on mostly like entrepreneurs, I think, or famous people, but here. So, okay, thank you for the reference. And finally, can you tell us one thing about yourself that I would not be able to find online?
I DJ sometimes at parties.
Cool. Which kind of music?
I'm a huge fan of so many music, so I can adapt.
Okay.
Because like bossa nova music from Brazil, I love it. Jazz music, classic music. But usually in parties, it's more about electronic and techno music that I play.
Yeah, it's rarely. I haven't been to jazz party yet. I mean, like big parties, like concert, yes, but. What is your ask for the audience, like the people listening to us? Where can they find you? Are you looking for, are you hiring? What do you want to ask our listeners?
So I think for now, the main thing is like the support that we receive from people that is really helping us, like sharing the word, because we are like sharing a lot of positivity and hope through our projects, through the vision we have a forest ecosystem, developing solutions, finding, let's say, breakthrough thanks to our science. And so we have our LinkedIn where we share a lot of news. We have a great newsletter that we prepare every month as well, with many pictures of the field and many pictures from the labs and everything. So it's quite exciting to read. I'm always really happy to see it and to read it. So I recommend, and yeah, of course the support that people can give us. And of course, if you have like any people that you know in the forest field, any scientists or someone from great companies that you think would be great to talk to, I'm always glad to meet new people.
We'll share the link of your website, your newsletter, and your LinkedIn profile in the description of this episode. Pascal, thank you very much for sharing all these experiences today and these advice. I wish you a great day, and I hope I'll see you soon. Not at Change Now this year because I can't go, but hopefully next year or in another place.
Sure, it would be a pleasure. Thank you, Gilles.
Hey, if today's episode was useful, share it with your entrepreneurs' friends so that we can all have a bigger impact on this planet. And give it a 5-star on Apple Podcasts. That will make my day. Thanks so much in advance. Have a nice day.